You're listening to Hard Truths for a Soft World with Trevor L Taylor. I'm Trevor, and on this show we talk about the stuff a lot of people feel but don't always say out loud. How technology, comfort, and modern habits are quietly reshaping our brains, our grit, and our relationships, and what we can actually do about it. Today's episode is called Born Plugged In: How Early Screen Time Shapes Young Brains. If you're a parent, grandparent, teacher, or just someone who cares about the next generation, this one's for you. Let me paint a picture. It's 7:30 a.m. You're trying to get everyone out the door. Your toddler's whining, your coffee's cold, and you're already behind. So you do what almost every modern parent has done at some point. You slide a tablet across the table. Instant silence. They're locked in. You exhale. You can finally pack the lunches in peace. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know two things. You are not a bad parent. That moment is exactly where today's conversation lives, because we now have a whole generation of kids who are, in a very real sense, born plugged in. Screens are there from day one. TV in the background, phones in strollers, tablets in restaurants, YouTube during dinner. And the big question we're asking today is, what does that actually do to a child's developing brain, especially their attention, their emotional control, and their real-world social skills? And just as important, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh no, we're already in deep, what can you do to course correct? So here's how we'll break it down. What's different about this generation of born plugged-in kids? How early screen time shapes attention and learning. What it does to emotional regulation, those meltdowns when the tablet goes away. How it affects social skills and real-life connection. Very practical steps you can start this week to reset your home. And I promise, this is not going to be a shame session. This is about clarity and action, not guilt. Let's start with reality. Most young kids today grow up in an environment where screens are just part of the air they breathe. Recent data on kids aged 0 to 8 years old found that on average, they're spending around 2.5 hours a day on screens. And a huge chunk of that is no longer traditional TV. It's tablets, phones, short-form videos, and games. Many kids are getting their own devices shockingly early. So when we say born plugged in, we're not being dramatic. This is simply the default environment now. Now, I want you to do a quick mental exercise with me. If it's safe to do so, maybe you're not driving, just think about a typical day in your home or in the life of a child you know well. When do screens show up? Morning, mealtime, car rides, bedtime? Are they mostly keep them occupied moments or intentional scheduled moments? Just notice that for a second, without judgment, because here's the key idea. It's not just the amount of screen time that matters. It's when, how, what, and with whom. We're going to talk about all of that. But to understand why this matters so much, we need to zoom in on what a child's brain is actually doing in those early years. From birth through about age 5, a child's brain is like a construction site working 3 shifts a day. Billions of connections are being formed and pruned. The parts of the brain involved in attention, self-control, language, and planning are wiring up based on experience. And here's the crucial part. Young children learn best from real-world back and forth interactions, what researchers call serve and return. That's things like a baby babbles and you babble back. A toddler points at a dog and you say, "Yes, that's a big brown dog. Can you say dog?" A preschooler shows you a drawing and you ask, "Tell me what's happening here." Those little micro moments, eye contact, tone of voice, facial expressions, are like fertilizer for the developing brain. Screens, even the best educational ones, cannot fully replicate that. They can add some vocabulary, some songs, some concepts, but they don't give the same rich, responsive, three-dimensional experience. So when a lot of early life is spent watching instead of interacting, we're subtly trading away some of the most powerful brain-building experiences kids can have. Let's talk about attention. If you've ever heard a child say, "This is boring," about pretty much everything that isn't a screen, you're definitely not alone. Fast-paced videos, games, and apps are designed to deliver constant stimulation. Bright colors, fast cuts, immediate rewards, no long pauses. That's like training the brain to expect high-intensity fireworks all the time. Now, compare that to real life. Sitting through a story in class, waiting your turn to talk, working on a puzzle, helping with chores. Real life moves slower. It has gaps, pauses, moments where nothing exciting is happening. Here's what research is telling us. Studies on preschoolers and toddlers have found that higher daily screen time is linked to more developmental and behavioral problems, especially when we get into that several hours a day territory. Kids tend to show more issues with attention, language, and overall milestones when screens are taking up big chunks of the day. Another line of research suggests that screen habits at 18 months can be associated with more symptoms of things like ADHD later on and lower developmental scores overall, especially when kids are already vulnerable. That doesn't mean screens cause those conditions, but it does suggest they can make existing challenges worse. Let's translate that into regular language. When the developing brain is trained on fast, loud, constantly changing content, everyday tasks can feel unbearably slow and hard. So what looks like my kid has no attention span is often my kid's attention has been trained to expect a different speed and intensity. Now, a quick but important note. Some children really do have underlying attention differences or neurodevelopmental conditions, and screens are one factor in a much bigger picture. If you have serious concerns, always talk with your child's doctor or a specialist. This podcast is here to inform you, not diagnose your child. If you've ever tried to take a device away from a child and watch them implode, this part is for you. You know the scene. Everything is fine while the show is on. You say, "Okay, all done, time to turn it off." And suddenly it's like you set their favorite stuffed animal on fire. So what's happening there? Think of screens as a powerful emotional regulator. They instantly distract. They instantly soothe. They instantly change a child's internal state. If a child is tired, restless, or upset, and the only tool they regularly use to calm down is a screen, guess what their brain learns? When I feel bad, I need this device to feel okay. Research is starting to show a kind of vicious circle. Kids who spend a lot of time on screens tend to show more emotional and behavioral problems, and kids who already struggle emotionally tend to gravitate toward more screen time as a coping mechanism. So screens are both the symptom and sometimes part of the cause. Now again, this doesn't mean if your child watches cartoons, they're doomed. It means this: if screens become the main way a child calms down, they miss opportunities to build their own internal calming skills. Things like breathing, waiting, naming feelings, asking for help, moving their body, hugging a parent, or holding a comfort object. Those are muscles, and muscles only grow when they're used. So if you're seeing explosive reactions when devices go away, it's not that your child is bad or spoiled. It's a sign that we've leaned a little too hard on screens as an emotional crutch. And the good news is that's something we can change. Now let's talk about social skills. Empathy, reading facial expressions, taking turns in conversation. These don't come from an app. They come from real people in real time. There's a second piece here that we don't talk about enough. It's not just kids on screens. It's adults on screens around kids. There's a term researchers use now, technoference. That's when a parent's phone or device use interrupts the natural flow of interaction with their child. Think of a baby reaching up while you're scrolling, a toddler saying, "Watch this," and you missing it, a preschooler trying to tell a story while we glance back and forth between their face and a notification. A recent analysis of multiple studies suggested that when parents are constantly distracted by devices, it's linked to poorer cognitive and social development and more behavior problems in young kids. That doesn't mean you can never answer a text. It does mean this: kids learn social skills from the quality of attention we give them. If eye contact, shared attention, and conversation are regularly losing to the phone, the child's social training ground is being hollowed out. So when we put all of this together, high-paced content, screens as emotional soothers, and adults half present because of their own devices, we start to see why this matters so much for a generation growing up born plugged in. Let's shift from problems to principles. What do major health organizations actually suggest when it comes to young kids and screens? I'm going to give you a simple, big picture version. Don't get lost in perfection, just get the direction. For babies under about 18 months, the general recommendation is avoid screens, except for things like video chatting with grandparents or loved ones. At this age, babies learn best from the physical, three-dimensional world and live, responsive people. For toddlers around 18 to 24 months, if you introduce screens, choose high-quality, age-appropriate content. Watch together when you can and talk about what's happening. For preschoolers around 2 to 5 years, aim for about 1 hour a day or less of high-quality programming. Again, co-viewing and talking about the content makes a big difference. For older kids, it's less about a magic number and more about consistent limits, content quality, making sure screens aren't replacing sleep, physical activity, school, or in-person relationships. One of the helpful frameworks out there talks about the 5 C's of media use. Things like the child, the content, the context, how everyone stays calm, and the communication around it. The message is simple. Don't just count minutes. Look at the whole picture of how media fits into your child's life. If you're listening to this and thinking, "Trevor, we are way past those guidelines," take a breath. You're not alone. Many families are. The goal is not perfection. The goal is movement in a better direction. Let me walk you through 5 practical shifts you can start this week. You don't have to do all of them at once. Pick 1 or 2 and build from there. 1, start with your screens. I know, that's not where you wanted to start, but it's the most honest place. If kids see us constantly attached to our phones, do as I say, not as I do, will not work. So ask yourself, are there moments when I could put my phone in another room? Could I create short, no phone windows where my attention is fully on my child? You might start with no phones during meals, no phones during the first 30 minutes after you walk in the door. Tiny changes here send a huge message. You matter more than this screen. 2, create screen-free zones and screen-free times. Instead of trying to control every minute, think about spaces and rhythms. For example, screen-free zones, the dinner table, bedrooms, the car on short rides. Screen-free times, the hour before bedtime, the first hour after waking up, or one weekend morning. You might say to your kids, "In our family, we keep dinner screen-free so we can actually talk to each other." Make it about family identity, not just rules. 3, don't just subtract, swap. If you yank away screens without offering alternatives, everyone's going to be miserable. So think in terms of swaps. Swap 30 minutes of videos for 30 minutes of playing outside, building with blocks, drawing, reading together. Simple games like I Spy or Simon Says. Make a short list with your kids. When we're not on screens, what are some fun things we can do? Put that list on the fridge so you're not trying to be creative in the middle of a meltdown. 4, turn watching into interaction. When your child is on a screen, make it more like a conversation and less like a trance. You can sit with them when possible. Ask questions like, what do you think will happen next? How is that character feeling? Would you do that in real life? This turns screen time from passive consumption into active learning and builds language and social understanding at the same time. 5, make a simple family media plan. You don't need a 12-page contract, just a simple written agreement everyone understands. For example, when we use screens after homework and chores are done. Where no screens at the table or in bedrooms at night. What we choose age-appropriate, non-violent, high-quality shows and games. How long? On school nights, we aim for about an hour or less. You can literally sit down and say, hey, we've been feeling like screens are taking over a little. We're going to make a simple plan so that we're in charge of our devices, not the other way around. Involve older kids in deciding the rules. They're more likely to cooperate if they helped create them. Let's make this concrete. If you're up for it, I want to invite you to a very simple 7-day reset challenge. You can adjust this to fit your family, but here's a basic version. For the next 7 days, no screens during meals. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner, pick at least one to protect every day. No screens in the hour before bedtime. Use this time for baths, books, quiet play, and connection. One daily connection pocket. 10 to 15 minutes where you are fully present with your child. No phone, no TV, no multitasking. Just you and them. Track it. Put a simple chart on the fridge. Let your kids put a sticker or check mark each day you stick to the plan. Notice what changes. At the end of the week, ask, did bedtime get a tiny bit easier? Did we talk more at dinner? Did the kids come up with new ways to play? You're not trying to create a perfectly screen-free home. You're trying to tilt the balance back toward human connection and real-world experience. Before we wrap up, I want to speak directly to the parent who's feeling overwhelmed right now. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you work long hours. Maybe screens have been the only way you've been getting anything done. Listen, you have not failed. You were doing the best you knew how with the tools you had. Now you have some new information, some new tools, and you can make new choices. This is not about ripping away every device overnight. It's about small, consistent shifts that, over time, will shape your child's brain and character in powerful ways. And remember, it's never too late. The brain stays plastic, changeable, throughout childhood and even into adulthood. Every day you choose more face-to-face interaction, more play, more real-world challenge, you're giving your child a gift. Let's quickly recap the big ideas from today. Today's kids are truly born plugged in. Screens are everywhere from day one. Young brains grow best through real-world serve and return interaction, not just watching. Heavy early screen time is linked to attention issues, especially when the content is fast, loud, and constant. Screens can become a shortcut for emotional regulation, making it harder for kids to calm themselves without a device. Both kids' screen use and adult screen use around kids shape social skills and behavior. Health organizations recommend very limited or no screen time for the youngest children and balanced, intentional use as kids grow. You can start changing things with simple steps: your own phone habits, screen-free zones and times, intentional swaps, co-viewing, and a basic family media plan. If this episode gave you something to think about, here's your action step. Pick one small change you're willing to try this week, just one. Maybe it's no phones at dinner, or no screens before bed, or one 10-minute connection pocket each day. Write it down, tell your family, and notice what happens. In our next episode, we're going to zoom in on a specific part of this story: how screens and games hijack motivation and make real-life goals feel pointless. We'll break down the motivation trap and talk about how to help young people get their drive back. Thank you for listening to Hard Truths for a Soft World with Trevor L Taylor. If this helped you, consider sharing it with another parent, teacher, or coach who's struggling with the same questions. Remember, the world might be getting softer, but we can still raise minds and hearts that are built for hard things. I'm Trevor L Taylor. I'll talk to you in the next episode.